Be good, Bill, right?
I think part of the problem is that we tend to paint ourselves in corners with our own logic and assumptions about causes of things. In this case, it's very easy. In a sense, we reduce something as horrendous, as horrific, and cataclysmic as September 11, when we essentialize it as its religion. It's these Wahhabi fundamentalists, it's this ideology of hatred. So when the media, when our leaders in government tell us it's not a war against Islam, but it's the issue of good versus evil. So when we make something as black and white as good versus evil, well, we know that they were Muslim perpetrators. So we look for some rationale, some reason, some causal explanation in the religion, and we don't go beyond that. Or do we go beyond the simplistic reductionist explanation of, oh, this is religion, let's find the text, let's find the scriptural rationale behind this. But let's dig deeper and get into issues of power, of politics, of property, of possession, of authority, of oppression and repression. We keep looking for a simple religious reason to explain it, but it's not that simple. You have to go beyond that, far beyond that.
And I think as we move from talking about Islam in the world to talking today about Islam in New York, I think it's clear that we can't be silent.
There's about 40 people who are in that building, some detained for months. We still don't know their names, and we don't know the specific facts surrounding why the government picked them up. When the government doesn't answer our questions, we can only begin to raise our own questions, such as whether or not the detention policy is a narrowly tailored investigation with proper respect for the detainees' rights, or it is a broad dragnet that is swooping up innocent people who are predominantly of Muslim and Arab descent. If it's the latter, that's not what America should be all about.
We shall not be moved. Louder! We shall not be moved like a tree standing by the water. Hold hands! We shall not be moved. Justice for detainees! Justice for detainees! We shall not be moved. Justice for detainees!
This is what the Muslim communities had to endure. The disappearances of close to 2,000 Muslim and Arab American and South Asian immigrants since September 11th is such an eerie reminder of the history that American Jews have had to deal with. In 1918, a man was picked up in Newark, New Jersey, a Jewish man, and said because he looked like a communist. It was during the Palmer raids. And this is a cycle of American history that our children will ask us what we did during this time. And when I think about acts of courage, I think part of what, as American Jews, as New York Jews, who live in safety and with much privilege, I don't feel like I was the brave one.
Opportunistically, the Bush White House seized on the idea that everything has changed. And that line, everything has changed, was always invoked to justify all kinds of anti-democratic innovations.
There has already been dozens of arrests of immigrants with final order of deportation as part of the absconder program. Arab and Muslim immigrants have been raided in their homes, arrested. The Department of Justice directed law enforcement to prioritize Arab and Muslims. Don't you think this kind of selective enforcement of immigrant laws smack of racial profiling?
I think it's very unfortunate, and I don't think I have to say this or convince anybody in this room of this, but the very fact that the policies and the racial profiling that's been engaged in by the federal government really knocks down to the ground the very freedoms that we purportedly are trying to protect. Unfortunately, it's not the first time in this country that these measures have been enacted, but we have to speak out because this is a repeat of history. People are being persecuted based on the way they look, based on what they wear, based on the languages they speak, based on religions they practice. I mean, as an Asian American, my community has faced this. We were the only group during the Second World War to be officially locked up by the federal government. Again, based on national origin. And so this is not the first time. And I'd like to think that this is the last time. But we have to be very vigilant and very active in this. So let me know when and where, and I'll be there.
Saturday at 3rd Avenue, 29th Street for the demonstration that we hold at the Metropolitan Detention Center.
I'm sorry, 12 o'clock at 3rd Avenue?
3rd Avenue, 29th Street.
29th Street. I'll be very honest. We've got a full day of budget negotiations on Saturday.
Strangely, there's a Chinese ideograph for the word crisis, which has two ideograms or word pictures. One, danger, and the other, opportunity. And this crisis, the danger was obvious. The opportunity perhaps less so, but over time, I sense that people are seizing the opportunity that was prompted by the danger and doing things to rectify their lives or correct their course that they might not have had either the courage or the impetus to do before.
Today, we are faced with serious issues in the United States. There are people who've been picked up left and right and are being detained. Right here in Brooklyn, there are about 40 gentlemen who were picked up because they were Muslim, okay? Or they were South Asian. And they were just in a computer system, and they randomly went after them and picked them up in the middle of the night when they're with their families, or if they're walking down the street. September 11th has been devastating for each and every person, whether you are white, black, Arab, Christian, Muslim, Jewish. It has been something that has impacted everyone, not just in the U.S., but across the world, because it was something that we never, ever dreamed would happen. Yes, it was Arabs that they claimed did it. These are Arabs that I do not recognize as Arabs or Muslims for what they did. Because in the Islamic faith, which people believe that they are Muslim, in Islam, God does not condone killing yourself and killing others. Okay? A person who kills himself immediately is supposed to go to hell. And a person killing other people, it's as if he killed all of humanity. Yes?
Well, I'm not really mad about, like I said, Arabs, but what I am mad about is that the way, even though it's not their fault in a way, but I'm kind of mad at, like, New York City for taking, like, drastic measures, and just because you look a certain way, you might get arrested or you might get treated in a certain way. And, like, they did to, like Vietnam, I don't want that to happen again.
Yes.
The people that caused September 11th, they said that Allah told them to do this. And if Allah really did tell them to do this, then why are they hiding?
Why are they hiding?
If Allah really told them to do it,
Okay.
why would they be hiding?
You're absolutely right. Why would they be hiding? Allah, who is God, can see everything. So when I say that Arabs are diverse, they're diverse in religion and they're diverse in culture. The only thing that Arabs share is the language. You have Arabs that are Christian, you have Arabs that are Jewish, and you have Arabs that are Muslim. And believe it or not, the smallest amount of Arabs are actually the ones that are Muslim. There are more Arabs who are Christians in the world than there are of Muslims. And I know that's hard to believe, but that is a fact.
And the third day is when we start finding body parts.
I would go to the park. I live across the street from the park, and at a certain point, this was a few weeks later, I was just sitting there and watching the grass blow in the wind, and the wind was coming, and the grass would just blow, and I thought, well, there's her spirit somehow, this invisible force. And that was sort of soothing at a certain point. There are times when I thought, why did it have to be someone in my family? If only 3,000 people, or whatever they say, died that day, why did one of them have to be my sister? You know, how much easier life would have been if that weren't the case. But at a certain point, you know, after a few months, you know, I started to go back to work, and you go through, you know, and work-wise, some other, you know, I got a grant for something, working on a book project, and some good things started to happen. And at first I found that out didn't mean anything to me because Karen was dead, and like, who cares about the book project or anything, when, you know, or a grant when you're doing research when my sister's dead. But then at a certain point I sort of got back into sort of enjoying some of the work I was doing. And then you'd see, like, I'd see a photograph of the Twin Towers with the smoke coming out. It would all come back to me, you know, and I'd feel depressed again. I'd feel sad again, you know, because of what happened.
I think it's understandable that a lot of Americans don't want to concede that they have been altered deeply by this. First of all, it's not the American way to acknowledge a change like that. It may not even be the human way. I mean, it was a horrendous sneak attack of the most contemptible kind, and therefore to say I've been fundamentally changed by it may seem to be an admission of a kind of defeat. It may also be simply a matter of people's unwillingness to face how badly they've been affected by it.
How much do we want to reveal to people who are newer immigrants about what has been happening in the recent past to other folks? The repression that's happened and what the government did to them. Like the things to watch out for.
I'm going to get the small plates for you.
Gary and I were out last Sunday doing tabling, and we got into it with this one guy because he started saying stuff about, you know, you should kill them all. And I said, so you want to kill my granddaughter? She's 18 months old. She's a Muslim. And he said, all the way across. He was just, no holds barred, just kill them all. And everybody was around us, and they were listening, you know. And it was very interesting because you could see them processing all of this. This is all going through their head.
And I'll tell you, that's where a lot of the fear in the Muslim community is coming from. I've had friends who have gently cautioned me. They've reminded me, you know, be careful. And a lot of that fear, of course, is coming from not wanting to risk, but a lot of it is also from not knowing what happened to people before us, who tried doing what we really did.
Maybe we should be doing other types of things. Because in these kind of scary moments when there's this super patriotism, it is hard to get people out.
I became afraid of what could happen around me, not from the outside, but from the inside, when people can put a flag up so instantly and say how patriotic they are when, you know, last week it wasn't in their heads at all. And it became so that immigrants had to put up flags, people, especially anyone, you know, remotely near the Middle East, people from India, it was no question, they had to have an American flag to show that they were okay. You know, they were supporting America rather than being against it. And I think there's something kind of wrong with that.
How safe or how threatened do you feel
Me?
these days? Yeah.
I had a really bad incident yesterday. I was like, yeah, I almost got into an accident.
Oh my God.
I didn't even tell Nigel. Because then he'll get upset, but he's too busy talking. I was driving on Fort Hamilton Avenue, and I was on my lane, and I was supposed to turn, you know how you have the arrows at 17th Street? Then these two white men in this small car, you know, start honking, and I'm like, I see you, I'm not going anywhere. And they roll down their window, and they're like, you fucking Arab, go back to where the hell you came from. Don't drive in our country. And I'm like, just shut up. Keep driving. Shut up.
I've caught so many people staring at me in the subway.
I
And,
still get that.
you know, and I dress Western, but I look who I am. I am South Asian. I look very, South Asian and a Muslim perhaps. But that I notice constantly. It still goes on.
Yeah.
But every morning, I've been told at bus stops to go back where I've come from.
Really?
Yes, and people who tell you are immigrants themselves,
Yeah.
But I haven't stopped wearing Pakistani clothes. I still wear them every Friday. I go to the mosque. And I'm not going to let that stop me. It's ridiculous. It's outrageous. But I think if my mother found out what was going on, she'd say, just pack up your bags. And she's been telling me that since 11 September. Why are you there? Just come back. You don't need to be there.
I know that since 9/11, and particularly since the situation in the Middle East has gotten so much more horrific, the people in Europe have begun to recoil from the United States. I can only say, again, that many Americans likewise have been recoiling from the United States. But it's harder in this country to recoil as openly and as open-heartedly as people outside the country can do. It's hard because of 9/11. It's hard because of the sense of omnipresent danger.
The level of hatred. It's a handful of people. Most people, overwhelmingly, most people, you talk about racial profiling, you talk about the loss of civil liberties, they're with you all the way. And every once in a while you get somebody who says, nuke them all or whatever, or worse. I've heard some pretty bad stuff. But it's okay to be openly racist. This is something
But you know what
really
it is? I
fundamental.
believe that if the government had taken a different stance, it wouldn't be validated, it
No,
wouldn't be
I know.
justified.
They know
And
it's
I think
okay.
over the months, because it's not stopping, it's the government is the one that's giving the signal, saying it's okay to do what
And
you
not
do.
only that, but they're perpetuating these
Yes.
policies.
And the government is now starting to say we have to use torture.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
This is justified.
Well, yeah, and the FBI reports of the suicide bombers in New York City. Shortly that day, after that article was out, I was getting looks in the subway, on the street, and the first thing they look at is my face and my hijab, and then my bag. It was so frightening, and then, you see, like, in some people, stares of panic or fear, like, is she a suicide bomber,
And I don't see many Pakistani or Indian women in the supermarket since 11 September.
Children, stop shopping. Democracy is not the same thing as the market. Advertising is not the same thing as freedom of expression. Stop shopping and give peace a chance.
When I was in the first hospital, I was sort of hanging around, not knowing what to do, and a surgeon came up from downtown covered in dust, and he said, "They're not finding any bodies. They've all been vaporized." And I thought, was Karen vaporized? It was so unreal and surreal and just weird. So, and then I thought, well, do I tell my mother that my sister Karen was vaporized? Now we know that there are no bodies, but at the time is the first, this is that day, this is September 11th still.
As I hit West Street, soon a couple blocks after that, started hitting some things in the street, not knowing what they were. I soon realized they were body parts, and there was just no way of avoiding them. I remember seeing a jet motor through the back of a car, a small car. The jet motor was in the back seat in the trunk of the car. The car appeared to have stopped at a light, and the driver apparently opened his front door and walked away. I met up with another fireman. We both kind of introduced ourselves, and we both kind of knew, I guess, inside while we were doing it, that we were going to team up and stick together. And I told him that we were told to go to the North Tower, and he said, "Okay, let's go." We decided we'd go on the outside of the building. People were jumping all around us, and we just kept going, and we made it. We made it into the North Tower, and at that point, we walked in, and we didn't see any command station set up. The only person we saw was the Reverend Michael Judge. The fire department chaplain was inside the lobby there, and he seemed to be saying prayers. He didn't seem like himself. I've known him in the past for different events and talked to him for a couple of hours on different occasions at different jobs, and he wasn't himself. He just seemed distraught of everything that was going on and the people jumping and all.
When we did find bodies, it was an incredible ceremony, and what we did is there are different sizes of body bags. They have a small body bag for small parts, like if you find a finger or a foot or something like that. And I think that was orange, I don't remember anymore. And the middle size, which I think was blue, and it was like a half body or a head or an arm or something sort of that size. And then you have the whole body bag, and those are black. And that's the whole entire bodies, or at least almost the size of a whole entire body. And what they did was, because it was such a, not a rush, but it was such a tempo working World Trade Center, so you didn't really stop. So you got the body up, or you got the thumb up, or whatever it was, and you put it in the body bag, and you put it in something they called morgue, that it was actually the restaurant of the building next door, that you piled up all the body bags. That sounded pretty awful. It was not piled up, but it was kind of beautifully lined up. First with the blacks, and then the blue, and then the oranges, like this. And then on the shift ends, they carry them out. And they carry them out on big, sort of, how do you call that? Well, things that they were holding, and they put all the body bags on there, or maybe 3 or 4 body bags. And it was 3 firemen here, and it was 3 firemen here, and it was 2 firemen walking up front. And then almost at the end, they had a station set up for all religion, all the world's religion. And they put down the body bags, and then all priests, I would say it's like 10 different priests for different religion came up. And they held ceremonies there, because you would never know what the body part religion was.
And my mother from the beginning said, I know she's dead. From that morning, my mother said, about noon on September, my mother said, you look at the building and the smoke pouring out, and we know she worked on the 104th floor, and the airplane hit it, whatever, the 88th floor or something, and just look at the flames. I mean, and think, how could anyone have survived that? My mother said, I just know she's dead. And I was saying, no, we don't know yet. So the second day, my mother came back to town, and Sue came in from Brooklyn, and and people started to come over to her house as if it's a shiv, as if she was already dead, bringing food. People bring, in Judaism, people bring bagels and lox and cream cheese, and people bring desserts and sandwiches. So people started to come over bringing food. I mean, what else are you going to do?
They called up the mother to say that they found her daughter. And they don't tell you what they find, they just tell you that they found, and to come and see if it belongs to the one that you lost. And when she got down there, they opened a body bag, and they found a heart. It was a rotten heart of the daughter, and they knew that it was the daughter's because they checked the DNA. So every day, I hear stories, these kinds of stories, about they found a finger, they find a thigh. Then I have people coming to the Angel Circle that a husband lost his wife, and they have 2 children, a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. And the little girl comes to Angel Circle, and she looks at the picture of her mommy in Angel Circle, and she says, there's mommy's picture, there's mommy's picture. But where is mommy? Because she doesn't understand what happened. She's 5 years old, and she's looking for her mother. And the father is crying to me, a big man, 6'4", 300 pounds, crying, sobbing on my shoulder, telling me how he has nobody to watch his children because he has no family, and now the wife is died. So every day there's different stories, from these families as to what happened, the outcome of this horrible thing. 10,000 children lost their parents. First, all that, I saved the land. waiting for her. I haven't heard from her.
I haven't tried to.
I stayed there at that level and was helping people, like I said, directing people out. Kept telling them, one more flight to go, you're almost out. And everything was going fine. Then all of a sudden there was a loud screeching, a loud noise, and I jumped into the staircase and I closed the doors behind me, holding the doors shut as I kind of stood in the corner of the stairwell. I was taught that the corners were the most structural sound part of the area, so I stood in the corner of the staircase there, and blackness instantly. There was a loud noise. It seemed like 8 New York City subway trains coming into the station at once, screeching with their brakes. And I remember the staircase was filled with people. Everybody was silent. There wasn't any screams. And I remember two police officers, ESU officers, coming down the stairs, and one of them come right over to me, and I said, "We got to get this door open." And both of us, with our shoulders, were able to get it open. We opened up the door, and we opened up into pitch blackness. When I shined my light, it looked like a snow globe where you shake it up, and all you saw was shiny things floating around. And now I believe that to be the glass that was crystallized from the first building coming down, the first tower. And you can hear the calls for help. I yelled out, "I'm a fireman. I can't see you, but if you can see me or see my light, come to me." People started coming to me, and I led them to the wall. I said, "Put your left hand on the wall and follow it back 50 feet or so, and there'll be a doorway there, and go into that doorway." That was the staircase, and that's what they did. They followed it, and 10 to 15 people came to the doorway, and
Okay.
and as I'm looking to my left, I'm seeing blown out windows from 6 World Trade Center, and I'm thinking, if anything happens, this is my next exit. This is what I'm jumping into if something else happens. So I'm picking out windows as we're walking along, and that same loud screeching is heard again, and it wasn't more than hearing it for a second, and then I got picked up and blown into the bottom of that window. I lost my flashlight, I lost my Halligan, and debris just kept hitting me. I guess it felt like a boxer just being hit by punches, and I went down to the floor, covered my head and everything, rolled into a ball, and I said goodbye to my wife. I said goodbye to my 7-year-old, and I said goodbye to my 2-month-old, and I said he'll never know me. And then everything stopped. All the noise, everything stopped, and still had the complete darkness, but I was still alive. And I remember my mouth was full of debris. Couldn't even breathe, so I had to reach in, clear out my mouth with my fingers. I took small breaths, and I remembered my water. I said, clean out my mouth with my water. I reached in my pockets, and both bottles of water were gone. I looked around the room, and there was 3 other flashlights, and there was 3 other firemen alive. The windows that I had come in, and although it had a whole exposure of windows, seemed to be filled up right to the top with debris, burning, and I realized at that point we had lost the other guys. I saw a chief who I know, and I walked up to him. I just saluted him. I said, "Chief, there's been a collapse. There was 8 of us, and now I know for 4 of us. 4 of them are trapped over there. they're back there, they're still trapped, and I guess not realizing the severity of the whole situation, really, of the many guys we would lose, he said, just get an ambulance. They placed me in an ambulance. I was taken to a hospital on 96th Street, and that afternoon, at the hospital, in the emergency room, I was able to get in touch with my wife, and I told her I was alive. I don't know how, but being in the hospital for a couple of days, I knew, but I just told her I was alive. Don't just take care of the kids. She was happy. And then it wasn't until that night I received a phone call from my brother-in-law, who's a fireman in the same company, Rescue 5, who informed me that all the guys from Rescue 5, all the guys I had breakfast with, every one of them is missing. And I said, what do you mean, every one? He said, every one. So what do you mean, every one? And we started going through names, and he goes, every one, Bill. And turned out there's 11 guys who passed away that day. And I don't know how I came back alive. And that's about it.
Since 9/11, the only subject has been peace. And I changed the name of the weekly strange worship from the Church of Stop Shopping to the Church of Stop Bombing. And the chant that we kept repeating again and again was, no shopping till you stop the bombing. No shopping till you stop the bombing. No shopping till you stop the bombing. Hey!
Mr. President! Do you remember Dr. Strangelove? Anyone? All right. They're still here, and they've kept a low profile, except now they've felt in disclosing the nuclear posture with you, that it was okay to say, this is what we will do. In the Bush administration, feel it's safe to come out of the closet and state openly that it is and will be the policy of this country to use first strike nuclear weapons against countries we decide are inimical either to our security or to our strategic interests.
We were upset that the President of the United States and the mayor of our city asked us, as a measurement of our patriotism, to start shopping again. Shopping is a sin, children.
The products reflect union busting, reflect unfair labor practices, and we always knew that there was a progression of violence that radiated from what was on that shelf, that product in front of you. If you went back and back and back and back to the origins of that product, we knew that there were kinds of violence all the way upstream. After 9/11, it became very clear that that violence also included bombing. That at that point, the violence also became graphic and real, and we knew that within days of 9/11 that we would kill as many people as were killed at the World Trade Towers, and sure enough, that's what happened.
In New York, the first sort of reaction was not anger, but actually, shock and horror, and not sort of drums towards war, but instead, well, what went wrong? What happened? How can we figure out so something like this doesn't happen again? And then what happens is within 24 hours, the graphics started coming up. They always have those graphics, America at war or America at risk.
It told us that America was under attack, and we believed it, and then people got upset. Then people started to cry and be horrified.
But we can't talk about wanting peace in the year 2001 unless we ask ourselves, why is it that Americans are intruding into the family life and into the national life and tribal life of people in the Middle East? What are we doing there? I think we all know the answer to that question. We want the oil that they stand on. It's what we call it in our church, it's shopping. It's our shopping problem. We need to shop for cars. We need to shop for gasoline that is at a artificially low price. And not just our shopping, their shopping. We need to keep all countries open to our globally free market economy. We need to police this global economy. We are the policeman that enforces this market, and we don't believe it's free at all. We believe that people are being killed to keep those markets open.
The first thing that happens, of course, is they had to make a coherent narrative out of 9/11, which means you need a bad guy and you need a good guy, okay? Bad guy, Osama bin Laden, fit the character perfectly. Good guy became improbably George Bush, a man who wasn't even elected to president of the United States except through skullduggery of his brother. And then after that, everything sort of fell into place. And you were either, for bin Laden or you were for America and George Bush and the military action in Afghanistan. And then that was clear. And then it became about the hunt for bin Laden and George Bush standing up tall against bin Laden. And it became almost like, a Western, or it became a romance novel, or it became an adventure novel, but it had a narrative.
Rather than going with the flow of realizing that something different is happening, something we never expected, something that would cause us to question our culture and our way of life, instead, the media used it as a way to affirm our way of life and affirm our common language of media still further, and make us feel safe by seeing these familiar images, these familiar techniques.
People weren't thinking about the outside world. People knew nothing about the outside world. It's an interesting fact, but the term that they use in American television news, or used to use, to signify any kind of story that was too foreign and too complicated and too obscure to bother with, the term they would use to refer to that kind of story was Afghanistan. We're going to do that, that's Afghanistan. I think that in a sense our chickens have come home to roost because, people had no clue as to what was happening out there. They had no notion as to how America was regarded by many elements worldwide. We would have been better off, of course, if we had known more about reality.
The media tells you what someone else wants you to hear, not actual straightforward facts. And then I realized that the reason that they do this is because that is what people want to hear. Disinformation is something that gives you it makes you feel like you are learning something, when in reality it draws you away from knowing that thing. So I realized that people actually wanted that. They wanted to be drawn further away from knowing facts while being made to feel that it's facts that they're hearing.
The attack was horrible enough to affect people in a very profound way, and I believe that New Yorkers will probably never get over it. It has never seemed to be an American experience to be braced for the next sudden cataclysmic explosion, but I think that certainly people in New York are getting used to it now, and I don't suppose we've seen the end of this by a long shot.
I think that definitely the events will escalate until we're finally aware that, until it's impossible to disguise the fact that it is a world war and that everyone is involved and everyone is affected.
So, without Karen now, the rest of us are much closer. Like now I speak to my family much more. The past 3 weekends I visited my sister Sue in Brooklyn, whereas it used to be I used to go there once a year. Now I've gone 3 times in the past month, 3 times in the past 3 weeks. Because I think you realize that, in the end, what do you have? In the end, for us, family is sort of all you have, or, your loved ones, etc. I had been dating someone, and then we broke up, and we sort of got back together. after September 11th. We'd broken up a few weeks before. And, you know, you sort of realize what's important in life.
The entire nation responded as if we all had suffered a death in the family. When there's a death in the family, what happens is that we come together. We overlook our differences, we rally, we circle the wagons, we support one another. And we are changed by that because we're made more mindful of our own mortality. Life is strewn with trap doors, any one of which could open under our feet at any given time. What happens when everyone experiences this or becomes aware of it is the level of mutual sympathy and empathy, in fact, grows. That then leads individuals to examine their lives and to question what their lives mean, whether they're living in such a way that their lives will be worth dying for. They read these stunning, simple, ordinary obituaries and begin imagining the script of their own obituary, wondering what might be said of them should a trapdoor open tomorrow. And that has led people to do some remarkable things.
One of my passions has always been social studies and multicultural education. Unfortunately, it became a career for me after September 11th. I was a 5th grade classroom teacher. I decided to go back and teach children. As many of us know, a lot of children had a great deal of difficulty understanding what was happening after September 11th. Many of the Arab and Muslim and South Asian children did not go to school for weeks on end. I started doing community outreach by doing teach-ins at churches and synagogues across Brooklyn and anywhere that people had asked for someone to come and speak about Islam.
Debbie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Hi. Yeah. Good to see you.
We're ready, right? Right, I'm ready.
Every one of these is the same. It has the 5 books of Moses in the original Hebrew. Each one is a handwritten.
One is a Holocaust.
Well, that's right, yeah. What happened was after the war, the Allies liberated in Prague, Czechoslovakia, a warehouse which contained about 1,500 scrolls in various states of ill repair. And they were trophies that the Nazis had kept from the synagogues that they destroyed of the various communities as they went through. And this was part of a collection that was supposed to be one day part of a museum of an extinct civilization. So they took the scrolls, they
good
brought...
enough to call it a civilization.
Yeah, well, you know.
I was very reluctant because I was afraid that I would face the backlash from my own community. Why am I being involved in such dialogue? And I only shared it with people who I knew who had the same background as me, as being open-minded. I didn't care if people in my community didn't accept me or recognize me. And I had a lot of Jewish friends, but we never talked about Israel or Palestine or the conflict. And we had really close relationships, but we never talked about those issues because neither one of us felt secure enough to bring those issues up. And Marcia gave us that forum. And for her to do that and expose me to other people who, in the beginning, couldn't even look at me, who were Jewish, couldn't even sit in front of me and make eye contact.
I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish, American Jewish family here in New York, in this area. And in fact, my entire family is Orthodox today, modern Orthodox, but it was also a Zionist Orthodox family. So the highest ideal as far as lifestyle is to move to Israel. And I almost did that. I was very close. I lived in Israel for 3 years. I served in the army. I studied. I worked on kibbutz.
And now, looking back There is someone special in my life that I owe the Dialogue Project to become that special person. There's a gentleman named Eddie.
I started asking, do you know any Arabs? Do you know any co-workers? I asked the rabbi of my synagogue, do you know an imam? Somebody introduce me. I'd like to go to a mosque. I want to make a personal connection. I thought of going down to Atlantic Avenue where you can get really good Middle Eastern food and just trying to make conversation. Nobody knew anyone. That was the surprising thing, that my dilemma of not knowing anyone, apparently, at least in my circle, was a universal one. That no one knew anyone from the other community. I didn't find anyone. Somebody found me.
And he's very, very connected to the land. He has family there. He served in the army. He lived there for many years. And to see the metamorphosis that this gentleman went through, and the growth and the understanding, but also knowing that others within the group are welcoming, inviting, such as the Arabs and the Muslims and the Palestinians there, that we all understand what he has gone through.
I think here in America, Jews tend to be even more narrow because they get to express their Zionist, pro-Israel, Jewish side politically maybe 1/10 of their waking time, maybe 1/100th of their waking time. They have to condense all their thoughts into a couple of lines of text, because they don't live it every day. They're not in Israel, Palestine. And so complex ideas or multifaceted opinions, I love Israel, but I want to criticize Israel, is almost a luxury that Israelis have, that Americans seem not to choose.
There's a group called Teush, which are young Israeli soldiers, people who still serve in the Israeli army, linking arms with Palestinians who have been able, from Israel now, or at the time Palestinians from the territories, bringing medical supplies to people in need, not just other Palestinians, but the Bedouins. The Bedouins have been caught in this conflict. Many were stuck in caves. They had no ability to go where they go to get their goods, to get food. So they literally formed convoys to bring medical supplies and food to people living in caves.
It's not easy. This is the hard work of peacemaking. Peacemaking is not easy work. War making is so much easier because there is money and power and political alliances and corporate considerations. Peacemaking takes a lot more tough, hard work. I say that as being an Israeli sergeant in the army for 2 years. Okay.
I visited a mosque about a month ago, and I was struck by something that I think has been lost in my Jewish tradition, which is physicality. The idea, men greet each other. This is probably so in Eastern Jewish tradition as well. Men greet each other by kissing. 1, 2, 3 kisses back and forth on the cheeks. Men are barefoot in the mosque. Their feet and shoulders touching each other. They kneel full body. Their butts up in the air. There's a certain abandon, physical abandon in some of that ritual that is potentially binding. The possibility of hugging, of kissing, of showing warmth. It's something that I hope will happen to me, that I will have the opportunity to greet some of my Arab counterparts in my conversations. I'll be able to greet them with a hug. I hope this year that will happen.